have a podcast or a video cast or I guess a talk show. Again, not sure what to call it, but it's going to be something where we have the ability to talk about Star Wars. So let's dive into the first topic, and that's going to be some news regarding Star Wars. So Mike, tell us a little bit about.
So we all know we lost Carrie Fisher, unfortunately. So if you haven't seen Rogue One yet, spoiler alert: 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. They CGI Princess Leia at the end of that movie, right?
Yeah.
So the speculation became, what happens in Episode 8? What happens in Episode 9? They've already said Episode 8 is shot in the can, ready to go. And she has a larger role in 8, so what do we do in 9? How do we address her character's death? Is it part of the opening crawl, like they did with Luke, where it's like, here's an update on Luke, here's what's happening? Somehow she died in a battle? Or does the movie open with a funeral? Like, what happens now going forward?
Yeah, which is an excellent question. I mean, I first want to kind of touch on how amazing Rogue One was. So coming from the perspective of someone who kind of didn't grow up with it as much, you're a couple of years, like I guess you're 7 years younger than me, a couple more years younger than Mike.
Just a couple,
just a
like,
touch.
like 2 or 3.
So were you aware? Did you know who General Tarkin was, or Grand? I'm gonna get.
Well, he's governor.
He's Governor Tarkin in Rogue
then,
One.
Yeah.
Were you aware that that character was in the originals and that they had been CG? So Mike, obviously you've been I wouldn't say you're a bigger Star Wars fan, but you've been a Star Wars fan longer than I.
Just because of my years on the Earth.
You've been on the Earth longer than me. So what did you think about the CG treatment of not only Tarkin but of course Princess Leia?
Tarkin was great. I really didn't notice it. It didn't take matter. It didn't bother me. I saw some things online where people were kind of complaining about it. Leia immediately was like, this is like Jar Jar Binks. Like, I think because it was just so bright and so lit, to where Tarkin was usually a lot darker for him. But again, you go on this journey and you get Leia for 10 seconds and you're so excited, you're so happy, that cool. But I wouldn't want 2.5 hours of a CGI'd Princess Leia, or even 15 minutes, or even 10 minutes of a CGI Leia. Like back we were talking about before, I don't want to see her CGI'd in 9 for even a minute. Which,
like, I wouldn't either. I mean, ultimately, I would prefer that they handle it in such a way where they do something with the opening crawl. I mean, what do you feel about it?
Yeah, I like the crawl. A couple other people I talked to would like them to have a full funeral for the character.
They could
in
do
the
that.
movie. I could see the movie starting like right away. The crawl says what happened to her, and then the first 10 minutes of it is the funeral, right? Because we don't know what's going to happen in 8. We don't know if Leia's Rey's mom, or who knows what's going to happen in all that whole part. Well, after 7, she's reintroduced as she's still like the leader, right? And then in 8, obviously we won't see it till this Christmas. But what we've heard is she has a very large role in that movie. So it's not like a 10-minute thing like it was in the first one, where she's going to have a lot of parts in this, where she's going to re-meet Luke, supposedly. We don't know, but they'll have a scene where they reconnect with each other. So I think the plan was in 9 for her also to carry through and still have a big part in that. Unfortunately, that's not going to happen now. So
how do they?
You have to address it in a way that's respectful to her and makes sense to fans. You don't want to piss people off.
Yeah,
you don't want to ignore it either, to where like let's use Dark Knight Rises as an example. They made no reference to the Joker whatsoever. It's just like, cool, he's locked up, and even though we broke every criminal out and the criminals are taking over the city, they make no reference. They don't see anything to him.
Because Christopher Nolan alluded to the fact that The Dark Knight Rises was supposed to be a very different movie, and they had to rewrite it because of Heath Ledger's death. And
right.
he handled it in such a way I thought was really appropriate, where he was like, it would be doing a disservice for Heath Ledger's role on the movie to even bring attention to it and be like, oh, well, the Joker is off in Arkham, or just to write him out of the movie. Whereas you can't do that with something as big as the Star Wars franchise. You have to address it, and we do know that they've already had a meeting, kind of like all of the writers for the franchise, all the writers for the next films, and they've sat down and they've discussed it. So there's something to be said, but it's such a weird place to be. I mean, number one, it's such a horrible thing that happened. The passing of Carrie Fisher, and then her mom, immediately after. that, you know, it really kind of affected me personally. Like, you know, as I'm sure I did a lot of other fans, where Princess Leia was like your first crush as a kid. I know for me it certainly was. Well, that's because you were 26.
That's a good point, the generational thing. That when you were a kid and saw her in Return of the Jedi, you were like, God damn. Like,
well, I mean,
this is kind of your first screen crush, because she goes from this. You see her progress all the way through the movies, and she becomes this badass in Return of the Jedi and kills Jabba. And,
so mine's really cheesy. My first was Kirsten Dunst in Spider-Man, which is horrible.
Yeah, well, that's not bad, but that's pretty close. I mean, like, that's a generational thing, which
right? It makes sense. She's wet in the alley, and Spider-Man's upside down, right, kissing her. I get it. Like, totally makes sense.
Totally makes sense. First
sense.
crush.
Totes fam.
Yeah, Totes fam. Yeah, no, Carrie Fisher was mine because, you know, space, and she was awesome. And she wasn't, you know, her character was always written to not be a damsel in distress. She always took charge, and she's a badass. And I like to think, you know, after she had passed on social media and things like that, I had put, you know, like, rest in peace, General Organa, because that's how I want to remember that. That's the character that she is. But again, it is kind of a touchy topic, because how do they address it? Because they can't basically come out and tell fans how episode 8 is going to happen, or, you know, they could be really vague and, like, you know, she's got a way bigger role, and the man, right. Like, dude, the worst part about it too is that, yeah, we knew that she was done, you know, filming. We had heard that, and she was flying back from London when she had the heart attack, which sucks. But moving on, and not to, like, you know, bring the whole talk show down.
The whole thing down, but we stick with the Star Wars. And if we go back to Rogue One with that kind of experiment, when Disney spent so much money to create this universe, right? So us as Star Wars fans, we get a Star Wars movie every year. It's like Marvel, right? So again, back to generational thing. Shane has superhero movies all the time.
Oh yeah.
If I wanted to see superhero, I had to watch, like, Lou Ferrigno as the Hulk on NBC, right? That's what you got. You know, right? Every
yeah.
Now there's like 5 or 6 this year, right? So we get all these different movies where they took a gamble on Rogue One. They rewrote the end. They changed a lot of the scenes with it. It's almost made $1 billion. So I think that gives them the confidence of, cool, we're gonna do Han Solo. We've already cast Han Solo. And then what's after that? Do we get Boba Fett? Do we get another rumored one? And then, if the young Princess Leia character needs to be used, I know if you've watched Stranger Things, which I'm sure you have, 11, she's been sort of unofficially campaigning to be cast as a young Princess Leia,
which would be great.
So,
yeah.
And by the time we get to another standalone movie, that's what, 5 years from now, right? So she'll probably, I don't know, 18, 19 at that point, which
would be okay.
Maybe we go in that direction, because there's no need to have a young Carrie Fisher or young Princess Leia
to do CG. Yeah, because you can recast her, which makes sense. I mean, but, you know, and it also kind of creates an interesting dialogue that I wanted to, you know, talk about and kind of approach to you guys, is that, you know, they CG'd Tarkin in Rogue One, because, you know, if you're going to tell that story, Tarkin's got to be on the Death Star. You know, he has to be there. But you know, he died. The actor died, what, 94? I mean, it was a long time ago, and so much time has passed where it's not inappropriate. I'm sure Disney, you know, talked to, you know, his family and his estate, make sure it was okay. But there are now Disney movies that are coming out so soon. Is it a too soon type of thing, or is it more of it just wouldn't work? It wouldn't, like, we saw that it didn't, you know, because I'll agree. Like, I thought, yeah, like Carrie Fisher, the CG Carrie Fisher at the end of Rogue One, it was jarring, because it was like, it was exciting, and at the same time it was like, oh, that's really weird, because, like, I've seen that opening segment so many times where I've never really, you know, you don't really see Tarkin. He's got, like, maybe, you know, 15 minutes of screen time total, and whereas you're so familiar with Princess Leia in A New Hope that it's jarring. And is it something where, you know, where do you kind of draw the line there? Where does Disney draw a line in being like, it's too soon, it's inappropriate, or it just wouldn't work? Like, what do you think?
I just think it wouldn't work. Even 5 years from now, when by the time we get, I think it's still too soon to try to do anything like that. You write her out the same way that Harrison Ford wanted to be written out, the same way he died. You know, odds are Luke's gonna die in Episode 9. It just makes sense. So that character just goes away. Because if we're going to have 10, 11, and 12, that Skywalker saga is over. You're not bringing Luke back.
Yeah.
There'd be no reason for her to come back in a 10th episode or at all,
If at
really.
all.
I mean, the only kind of immortal characters you have are R2-D2, C-3PO, and, say, Chewbacca. Right.
Well, he was animated. He was animated in the prequels. Like you were talking about doing like a marathon. I'm like, well, you can skip 1, 2, and 3. like for all intents and purposes. Like and like this is like no shit. Like this is truly, honestly, how I felt about this when they announced Rogue One. My initial thought was, oh, that's cool. We're gonna get a Star Wars prequel. Like completely disregarding and this is not just to shit all over the prequels, but they're not good. Like, really, if like what they wanted, they should have just made Episode 3 and made it a longer thing. But of course, George Lucas had bigger plans, which ended up kind of panning out. Like, and we didn't really see how they would pan out until now, because like I felt like the Clone Wars should have been a movie, not just Attack of the Clones, that you just introduce the Clone Wars. But then, you know, they've gone on, like Lucasfilm has gone on to make the Clone Wars TV show, and now we have Rebels, and both of which are really, really good. I watched like the first season of the Clone Wars, and I thought it was really good. I thought it's a lot of fan service. Like they make nods to the movies.
Well, and Disney's wiped that from canon now anyway. So
Did they wipe Clone Wars or
yeah,
'cause-
Rebels is, but the Clone Wars cartoon series that was all wiped because that was all pre-Disney.
I didn't know that.
So yeah, the Rebels is, but Clone Wars is out.
Out.
Is out. So speaking of moving forward with Han Solo, the standalone, you need to look online. There's a fan film, right? It's called The Smuggler's Tale.
Yeah.
It's goddamn amazing. If you
Yeah.
watch it, if the movie is anything like that, it's gonna be outstanding. It's fantastic. I don't know. It's maybe 10 minutes.
Well, the guy that plays him is the one that does like all the Robin Williams impersonations and stuff, and that dude's like blown up insanely. So like he got like a really good reputation for doing impersonations, and like that's how they cast him. I think it was through Kickstarter, right? I think they came through.
I mean, we live in such a strange.
I don't know. I just found it and it was great.
Yeah, we live in such a strange realm where like media can blow up, like including a show like Redbeard Live. Tell your friends.
Yeah.
Make sure you follow the channel. But you're right. I mean, like, there's so much potential for a Han Solo film. I mean Han Solo
Right.
Cup. You fill me up, make me excited for a Han Solo movie.
That's the new theme song
For the Han Solo movie.
Han Solo.
Han Solo Cup.
for the Han Solo.
You
movie.
guys, yeah, recorded straight from Nirvana,
Straight.
live from Nirvana. So
Check
just
mark that now.
to
fam.
kind of bookend the kind of the Carrie Fisher conversation. In your eyes, let's ask you. Let's start with you, Shane. In your eyes, what do you think is the most ideal way they handle Carrie Fisher moving forward, or in episode 9, because she finished 8? But how do you think they would best handle that?
I mean, there's a couple different options. Usually there's either A, they recast her, which I'm assuming is never going to happen because there's outage.
Yeah.
B, they do full CGI, C, they do partial CGI, which I think they did with Fast and Furious with Paul Walker. Right?
Yep.
Took out his brother, his face on it.
Yeah.
Well,
they did the
same
same.
thing with Tarkin too. It's an
They
actor.
did the same with
just
Tarkin,
put
and
a
then they
face
did the
on
same thing with Brandon Lee in The Crow, and that was made in the 90s.
it. Right.
You know, so what do you think would be the best option? Well, you got your mic like hanging way down. Can we hear Shane now? Is that good? Can you hear him now? You should have audio. Okay. Well, let's move on to your mic. I mean,
Well,
troubleshooting
Shane
everything.
feels like that if he had audio, he would say no more Princess Leia if his microphone worked. His head is shaking, so it's
there you
no.
go. That's what he said. So
I just want to see opening crawl, a part to it, that some sort of battle happened between 8 and 9. A planet blew up, a ship went down, something, and then we just start.
yeah.
Dad jokes. That's
Dad
the
jokes.
first-
That is going to be the theme of the
first
show.
dad joke.
First dad
The
joke.
youngest dad on the show has the first dad
The
joke.
youngest dad. He has to.
was
He's the
lit,
youngest.
fam.
He's the youngest one.
That was the best, fam.
That was lit, fam. Totes lit. So I'm like, what do you think? How, like, so
Totes
they approach it with the crawl.
They approach it with the crawl. We get the first couple sentences. Some large battle happened. She was a casualty of war.
Yeah.
It's mentioned in the beginning, a nod to it, and then we just
And then move on.
we move on at that point. We're not dwelling on it. It's acknowledged, and then it goes. Because if you don't acknowledge it, people are gonna be like, "What the what the hell?
Yeah, that's
How do you
all. Like
not
that's
acknowledge
also
it?
in bad taste.
Right.
If you don't
have to
acknowledge
do
it.
something. It's just something small. It's
Almost,
like
I mean,
acknowledgement.
almost even you put her in a heroic role where you write, her passing, and it almost pays homage to Carrie Fisher herself by doing something like that. The greatest thing about Star Wars is that the canon of Star Wars itself lends itself to being able to write something into the opening crawl, because you look at every single one of the movies and there's a huge gap of time. A lot of like events happen in between the
Right,
movies
so
where
just-
you can explain it in the crawl, and then it's not such a dire issue.
Put some heroic thing in there. She was the last one to go down with the ship. She was the last one on the base. She
Yeah.
gathered some sort of intel and saved everybody. She was on a spy mission and was caught. Something that just gives her the final, she's a badass and she can, go on. And here's a better question. Do we CGI her ghost? Is that something to where we have, like, the Obi-Wan
It's not a
ghost?
because she's not actually a Jedi. So
I-
she's not supposed to be
But she's
But
force
she's-
sensitive.
She's force sensitive because she felt when Han Solo died.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
I mean, that could be something too, but maybe that's goes back to we don't want to CGI. We don't even want to see her as a force ghost.
Yeah,
Maybe that's too much.
I mean, it's we'll see. Time will tell. But I think the underlying thing that I feel really confident is, like, I trust Disney, man. Like when Disney acquired Star Wars, when Disney acquired Marvel, everyone was like, "Oh, I don't know, man. I don't know." And I'm like, they haven't led us astray yet. Like even the weakest Marvel Cinematic Universe movie,
Which is Iron Man 3.
which is Iron Man 3, is still far better than what you would expect to get from
It's far better than if Warner Brothers was doing an Iron Man movie. That's a subject for another time.
that's gonna be the next show.
Maybe that's next week. We talk
Is-
about DC movies.
Is DC movies. I think that's a great idea. So Shane, do we have audio back for you?
I'm assuming so. I don't know if it's what I put this way. Can you guys hear me? Yes.
Get a little bit. Can we get a little bit feedback? Can we hear?
I can see your lights going on your microphone.
Yeah, we see the technology
Well, it's been
booming.
going, so